you're the one that's going to be on the spotlights on you. I don't think they care as much about what I have to say, but here we go.
Okay.
Thank you everyone for joining us, for supporting sales and expanding the people map, addressing common objections that keep you sellers, prospect influence maps too small. With Jessica Weiss. My name is Cody Hilliard. I'm the BDR manager here at Consensus, and I will be your moderator for today's session. DEMOFEST is presented by Consensus. Consensus is intelligent demo automation software that helps scale pre-sales with interactive video demos. You can learn more at goconsensus.com or view the automated micro demo at the link in the Docs tab on the right of your screen. Consensus is proud to provide this event for free to all attendees. However, we would like to invite each of you to donate to our company's humanitarian organizations if you would like to. You can learn more about this and donate by visiting the DEMOFEST Gives Back booth in our virtual expo hall in the Booths tab, or at the link in the Docs tab on the right of your screen. When we invite you to join us in our DEMOFEST community on Discord, our community is where you can connect with speakers, get exclusive access to content and events, and where the conversation will continue long after the DEMOFEST event has ended. We encourage all attendees to join us and so many others. You can join the community at the link in the Docs tab. We encourage you to participate in today's session. On the right side of your console, you can see a few ways to engage with us throughout the session. The chat function will allow you to engage with us as well as other attendees. Throughout the session, you may see a few polls. We encourage you to participate as your feedback is important to us. Our speaker will be taking questions from the audience at the end of the session, but we encourage you to ask questions at any time through the Q&A box. If at any time you are having technical difficulties, head to the gear on the bottom of your screen. And here you will see a help document to help troubleshoot common issues. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker. Jessica Weiss has over 5 years in sales and go-to-market roles in healthcare technology and over 12 years within the healthcare industry, serving several stakeholders from providers to payers to life sciences and advocacy organizations. She started the sales enablement department at Phreesia and has grown the team to 10 plus individuals. The team leads training, tooling, collateral, playbook creation, and documentation for both the sales and pre-sales segments. And with that, I will turn the rest of the time over to you, Jessica.
Cody, thanks so much. And it's really, really great to be here today. Cody, I'm going to ask you to just come off mute if at any point I go on mute or my tech goes awry. But thanks so much. I'm going to go ahead and start presenting. Just give me a holler if things are not showing up for folks. Okay, awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get started. As Cody mentioned, I am here today to talk to you about managing your stakeholder influence maps. Thrilled for that. But I want to start off by getting to know you. So, Cody mentioned polls. I'm going to go ahead and use this one because I find it to be really user-friendly. Go ahead and I'll do it with you. Pull up your Slido.com. You can do it by using the QR code on your computer or logging into Slido.com and using the hashtag. And let me know about you. So who you are and what type of role do you work in. That's going to help me make sure that I tailor the conversation really effectively today. So go ahead and grab that. We've got 3 people in the room. We'll wait till we get up to 5, just so we make sure we know who we're chatting to. Okay, awesome. So who are we talking to today? Wow, we have a lot of folks from the training enablement world. We've got some sales engineers on the line, and we've got some folks in other departments. For those other departments, you'll have to let us know in the chat when we're off who we're talking to. Awesome. A little more sales engineers, still talking to more trainers and enablers. That's great. All right, we'll give it 1-2 more minutes. Awesome. Okay, well, one more question as we're hopping in and getting started to kick off the conversation today. stop that poll and move on to one more. This one's going to be a sort of fill in the blank answer. Give me your raw information. So tell me, I would love to hear from all of you. What is the most important aspect that you think of when you think of your customer's business? Is it product? Is it the technology that they work with? Is it their customers? Let me know sort of what your thoughts are. Awesome. We've got 4 folks typing. We've got someone who said employees, the technology they work with, cost. Amen. We'll get two more in here. Innovation. Yeah. Business goals, the customers. Costs and costs. We're getting lots of votes on costs. All right, I'll cut off the poll in just one more. All right, business goals. Amen. Okay. Well, all of these are wildly important. I'm going to go ahead and agree with Richard Branson when he says, a company's employees are the greatest asset and your people are your product. So today's conversation is going to be a conversation about people. And why is that? As we look to map out our organizational charts, understand the stakeholders and the opportunities we work with in deals, every single org chart is about people. So whether it's an org chart that focuses on business divisions, whether you're trying to identify those nodes of supremacy where you find a lot of influencers, whether you're doing it by functional area, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it all starts with people. So to that end, let me tell you a little bit about myself. And I'm going to switch screens. Cody, just as I do this, let me know if I've sort of messed it up for anyone or if you can still see the screen just as it is. Awesome. So hi, I'm Jess Weiss. I oversee, as Cody mentioned, our sales enablement and training efforts for Phreesia. That means I have the privilege to work with our net new sales teams, as well as our sales development or pre-sales organizations. And really to kick us off, I want to tell 2 stories about myself. So the first one has nothing to do per se with the business world and the privileged work that I get to do every day. Instead, it's about a big art installation. So I like to paint. And you can see one of my paintings behind me in that photo. So being a painter, I've accumulated some artist friends. And in one summer, I had the opportunity to really help with the installation of a piece of public art. And, it was the first time that this particular group of artists had the privilege to do a project that was so big. So I show up one day, wearing a pair of overalls and got a hope in my heart. And, everything had gone wrong. They didn't have the right tools that they needed. They didn't have the right parts. Everything was sort of in havoc. They didn't have the opportunity even to train me on a single small task that I could help with. There were master welders. They were folks who were good at electricity and setting those things up. But nothing was sort of going right. So lucky for us, there were other public pieces being installed at the same time, and lots of those were being installed by more tenured teams. So, being the precocious individual that I was, I made friends with these folks, and being the generous groups that they were, they actually did have the right tools. They had the right parts. And so needless to say, a couple of days later, we were able to put up a 40-foot aluminum sculpture successfully and do that for the community event. And that story really made me realize that really nothing gets done in a vacuum. You need people. The saying goes, you need a village to raise a child. You need a village to get anything accomplished. So the summer ends and I go off to work at a new company. A year or so goes by and the company goes through a big reorg. And this was the biggest reorg that I had ever been a part of, nothing kind of small. And being the sort of green employee in the company, I had some questions for my leaders. And I asked them, why are we doing this? What are the pillars of change? What were the principles here that led to this reorg? And it came down to one phrase. That phrase was customer relationships. Those folks who stayed valued customer relationships, and those who left didn't. And so really from that day onward, I had it blazed into my mind that not only do things not get done in a vacuum, but instead, the only way to get big stuff done is when you have those strong relationships with customers. And so that's really where we start. That's where we begin. We, if you're on this call, are in the game of doing really big stuff. And we have to know our customers inside and out, sometimes better than they know themselves, in order to accomplish those big things. So it really does come down to knowing our customers' organization. So that's why we start with mapping out the customer organization. It's how we find our way. And when we are able to map out the organization, we gain. We gain in influence, we gain in intelligence, and we gain in resilience. Influence because decisions are only made these days by a cohort of individuals. And so we got to know who those people are. This trend went up exponentially during the pandemic when distributed, not in-person work became more prevalent. And so more stakeholders have to be involved in every single decision that happens. So it really, really matters to understand what that is so that we can know who's weighing in on the conversation. Intelligence, because when you can see the dynamics within your customer's organization, you actually get to better serve your individual customer and better serve their enterprise needs. And last but not least, we gain in resilience. And what do I mean by that? So, when our relationships go beyond just the single champion that we're partnering with in an organization, if that person leaves, we actually get to stay. That means that we're much less vulnerable whenever there is a personnel shift in the organization. You'll hear me talk about that at least 2 more times in today's conversation. Another way of saying that is that stakeholder mapping inherently illuminates power. It does this because it helps us demonstrate where there is capacity in an organization and where the resources we need to accomplish our goals exist. Secondly, it helps us visualize those patterns that were previously invisible to us, as well as the structures and the dynamics in place in the organization. It helps us to understand how information flows between stakeholders, how people communicate with each other internally. It helps us surface gaps, like for those who are not being represented in the conversation. And last but not least, it supports an understanding of these things as they change over time. None of these things are static. So in short, by working our stakeholder influence map, we're organically going to uncover the best strategies for navigating challenges and blockers in the deals that we work. So today we're going to go through lots of different ways to make our influence mapping stronger. But if there is nothing else that you take away from today's conversation, remember this: channel Nike, just do it. In whatever format resonates best with you. Call it a people map, call it a stakeholder influence map, a matrix org chart, I don't care. Just write them out. The mere act of writing them out is going to make you better at your job and able to provide more value for your customers. So what are we going to do today? We're going to go through a short history lesson. And then we're going to talk about figuring out how to influence. We'll go through one of the most common practices there and a few gotchas. We're going to go through figuring out how to influence especially when you have incomplete information about an organization. And then we'll also get into some objection handling techniques. At the end, I'll stop sharing, and if there are Q&A, then we'll be able to have time to go through those as well. So let's begin with a history lesson. Okay, I am a true nerd, and when I found this, I was amazed. This is the first known organizational chart ever. This was invented by Daniel McCallum. So it was dreamed up by him and drafted by George Hold Henshaw, who were both engineers at the New York and Erie Railroad. And this was drafted in 1855. And you'll notice that it really, really resembles an engineer's mind who works on the railroads. So they believed that they could take the vast wilderness of the wild, wild west and transform it into single points that were connected by disparate railroads. You see them embrace the chaos of nature in this, and it's beautiful. So if you look at this org chart, it really sort of embodies a similar thing. It takes something very messy, very organic, and starts to organize it. Because I think this is so epically awesome, let's zoom in. So you can see a little bit more here. I love this document. It's like so beautiful. It's something that you may even want to put on a wall. It's elegant. And you see in the corner what they called it. So they called it a diagram representing a plan of organization exhibiting the division of administrative duties and showing the number and class of employees. So I'm not going to say that this is the easiest thing to follow. So it evolved. Let's fast forward 70 years or so to the precursor of today's organizational chart. And this should look like a little bit more familiar to folks on the call. It has the pyramidal structure that we're all familiar with. So this was invented or drawn out by Herman Hollerith from the Tabulating Machine Company in 1917. And if you look at most org charts today, they actually do have a similar structure to this. This was used up until the 1950s, and then we were able to evolve pieces off of this. So maybe actually let me stop sharing for a moment so that I can look at the chat and see what is the Tabulating Machine Company today. Can we have some options in the chat just to make sure folks are not only digesting their lunches? All right. Well, I'll give you all the answer as I continue the presentation. So today, awesome. Awesome. Okay, so anyways, today the Tabulating Machine Company is known as IBM. And of course, it was IBM who dreamed up the original org chart. This guy, Herman Hollerith, was also the same guy who created the employee punch card. He was a master at turning messy human systems into machine-like processes. And so let's look at some of those today. How do they manifest in our organization? And what are things that we can learn from them? So the first one we'll talk about, this is kind of the most common one, is a hierarchical org chart. If you think about this, the power flow in an organization like this is really top to bottom, where the top people have the most power and the bottom have the least. If you think about the lines of communication, members usually communicate with the person that they report to and those who report into them. So if you're working an opportunity with a fairly common hierarchical org chart, you can expect to have communication patterns that are sort of siloed. They go up and down within their department, but maybe not side to side. So what's a good example of that? You might think of Amazon when you think of a hierarchical org chart. The second example that we'll talk about today is a matrixed org chart. So you can see this is where there's an individual project and different stakeholders across different functional types all work on the project together. That means that individuals can actually influence across the organization, not just up and down. And you have that horizontal and vertical communication flow. So the challenge right here might be, there's a lot of stakeholders that might need to weigh in on your opportunity. So it's kind of slow. If we think about a common example of this, you might think of Google. Google's got all these different types of matrices going back and forth. The last org chart that we'll talk about today is a flat org chart. We see this often in smaller organizations where individual contributors have much more responsibility, but that also means they have more decision-making power. And so the communication flow is much broader. It might be that individual contributors are actually doing awareness-based communication around best practices across the organization. And so what's nice about this is, as a seller, you might be able to be much more agile in an organization with a flat org chart, but the dollars there might not be as big to spend. An organization with a fairly flat org chart, but is not small, is one like Apple. And then last but not least, just for some comedic relief around a comparison point, we've got Facebook, and no one really can figure out how decisions are made at Facebook. Awesome. So we have talked about a little bit of a history lesson on org charts today. Now let's talk about what are some of the ways we can figure out how to influence our stakeholders. So I'm going to go back into Slido, and I'd love to see a few people answer this next question. Who should you include in your stakeholder map? So pull back up your slido.com or pull up your cell phone, and let's go ahead and answer this question. Who should you include in your stakeholder map? You may answer this with answers like decision maker, all right, we've got one response in here around decision maker. Anyone else? All right, we've got a few people participating. Any and all. I like that answer. Go broad. Cast a wide net. Influencers. I like that one a lot. Committee leads. Sure, yeah, committee leads. Those are going to be potential leaders of departments that weigh in. Awesome. So I'll give you a quick litmus test. Where do we start when we answer who's going to show up on our stakeholder influence map? We should just be answering the simple question, who's going to weigh in on your deal? And this should not be an internal question. Anyone at your customer's organization or a third party that weighs in, maybe in a funding capacity, that is going to weigh in on the deal should show up on your stakeholder influence map. A few more guideposts to live by. Every single opportunity, even if it's a separate opportunity in the same organization, should have a unique stakeholder influence map. So you can begin to imagine how the organizational chart evolves from an org chart to be more of an influence map, knowing that you need a different one for each opportunity. The second is that that map should definitely evolve over time. It's not a static thing, but as you learn more and more about the organization, you're going to understand what are some of the relationships and how have they evolved. Can you move someone from being a blocker in your organization up to be a supporter? Things like that. So now we'll go through a framework that is pretty common. Say this is one of the most standard stakeholder mapping opportunities. And it's really simple. It's just a 2x2. On the horizontal axis, you've got those organizations that strongly oppose or object to your position versus those individuals that strongly support your objective or position. On the vertical axis, you've got a measure of influence. So you can imagine your stakeholders that are your biggest champions and going to be your decision makers are in the top right, and so forth. By the way, this is one of the methods that's most commonly used in campaign political strategy. And it's nice to know that we can also use it in sales. So as I mentioned, you're going to have blockers and supporters on this axis. And quick tip, if you don't have anyone in the blockers category, you're doing something wrong. All opportunities should have names there. If there are no names there, you should have already won the deal. The next axis, as I mentioned, is around your decision makers. Those are going to be those folks who are influential or powerful in the opportunity. One thing that we encounter a lot as sellers is focusing only in the top half of this graph. But what we forget is that there are a number of individuals who have moderate influence on the opportunity, and you need to have their names there also. Because if you think back to their org chart, those are the individuals who are influencing your main decision maker. Maybe your main decision maker is the one who's actually signing the check, but these individuals are going to be the ones who end up using it, who are putting bugs in that individual's ear. And why do we do that? Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, in order to build resilience, we need to have more than a single-threaded relationship with our prospects. Why? A single-threaded relationship only lasts as long as your champion remains at the company, or remains a supporter, or remains with specific budget in mind for your project, or remains with the same priorities as you started with. And we know that 70% of people quit their jobs within 2 years. And 1 out of every 3 employers now expect job hunting. And so that's quite tricky. We have to know our customers better than they know themselves, because in the end, things always change. It's a bit of a risky game to play. And we're always on the outside looking in. We don't work at these organizations. They're our customers. So we're always going to be operating in a stance with incomplete information when we're working with our customers. When you're on the outside looking in, this is supposed to be funny, duck because someone's always throwing something at you. The idea here is there's always going to be something that throws us for a curveball. So how do we figure out how to influence with incomplete information? Another way to ask this question is, what do you do when you don't have a complete org chart to start with? Should be a pretty obvious answer. You work to expand it. So as we go through the last portion of our slides section, I want to give you 3 really simple tactics that you can use to expand your people map. And these are agnostic to industry. You know, individual industries are going to have specific needs, specific types of stakeholders you need to go after. These should be agnostic. The first one is use consensus. That's why we're all here today. Consensus has been wildly helpful for our sales organization in expanding the people map. This is a sales rep that I'm so epically proud of. We've been using the tool for about a month. And this sales rep shared a story with me where she was working a doctor's office, and she was partnering with a CIO on the project. The CIO was not the ultimate decision maker, and he kept telling our sales rep, yeah, I'll go back and share it with the CEO. But they were getting delayed in the opportunity, and she had never been introduced to the CEO. So she tried to use consensus as a way to get around that type of gatekeeper or blocker. She said, no problem. I know that time is really, really intense. Why don't you take a look at this interactive demo, share it with your CEO. If needed, it can be on their own time, and then we'll go from there. So needless to say, the CEO watched all 5 sections of our demo, thanks consensus, and he reached out to our sales rep using the email that's in the demo board. So we felt like this is a really big win, and that customer has now been live with our platform for a number of months. That's the type of power that we have, where maybe we have a gatekeeper, maybe it's a time constraint, but consensus has been a really great opportunity for us to expand the people map and discover additional individuals to partner with. Remember, we should be answering the question, who's going to be weighing in on the deal? Sometimes we don't know all of those answers, but consensus can be an automated tool to help us get there. So the second tactic is going to be around finding their why. So I mentioned a moment ago, we talked about how do you find additional individuals? Well, we also, for the individuals that we do have, we should be identifying the following pieces of information for each one. The first one is, who do they influence and who influences them? Sometimes it's going to be obvious because of their organizational chart, their reporting structure. Who's their boss and who do they manage? You want to understand the strength of that influence structure. The third thing is, what is the history of each relationship? Have they worked together for a long time, or is there a new guard here? How does that impact the influence? And last, but certainly not least, what role does the hierarchy play in the amount of influence? So we talked about, at the beginning of today's conversation, a bunch of different org chart structures. Let's go back to them for a moment, because you can learn a lot from each of them. So in a hierarchical org chart, there's that clear line of commands, but it might be tough to expand your influence map outside of the silo that you're working in. You may have a matrix org chart where you have synergies across each of these quote unquote stovepipes. So it might be easier to expand your people map, but many people are going to weigh in on the deal. That might slow things up for you. So it's a trade-off. Last but not least, again, you might have a smaller organization with a flat org chart, easier to maneuver, fewer people weigh in on the deal, but potentially smaller dollars there. So we talked a little bit through the organizational structure about ways that you can gather hints to what the organization's why is. You may also know from this what their mission statement is, who are the stakeholders that they serve in their organization, and that'll give you hints as to their own organizational why. And individuals, every single person on our stakeholder map lives within the organization, so that matters to them. But they may also have their own personal why. And you should be asking yourself, which is more important to your sales efforts? I would argue that neither is more important for your sales efforts. The organizational why or the my why, you really need to uncover both. Depends on where you're at. Sometimes they differ, sometimes they're nuanced interpretations of each. You need to know both to understand who you're working with and what matters to them. Last and certainly not least, we're going to channel the concept of the best interest principle when we need to break through to a more influential stakeholder. So our pre-sales individuals get this script potentially all the time. One of our SDRs may call up a prospect and say, hello, would love to speak with you. Do you have a few minutes? The prospect will respond and say, oh, it's not me. I don't handle these types of conversations. And our SDR may say, we really do love speaking with folks like you, but totally understand. Happy to work with your colleague. Who's the right person? And then they get brushed off. So that person who answers the phone is a gatekeeper. They're not going to give you, access to the individual you need. So the biggest thing that we have to figure out is, how can we handle that gatekeeper when they won't accept a meeting and they also will not introduce us to others in the organization? So let's ask ourselves for a moment. I may not ask you to put this in the chat, even though it says it on the slide. Just ask yourself, Why is it that you want the contact to introduce you to others in the organization? So why could that be? Some reasons may be, I want to get the deal done. I want that initial conversation, really eager to get started. We see a lot of value potential. It's possible that they have sister organizations that are already working with us. We really care about it. The next question that I would encourage you to ask if you're in a situation like that is, whose best interest is it for me to get that conversation? And the answer almost invariably is going to be myself. I want to meet quota, or I want to be able to get on the call. And they're sort of me-focused answers. I would encourage folks to flip that thumb around, and instead of having a me-focused answer, I would encourage them to think, how might it be in our customer's best interest to actually get on the phone? And when we answer that question, it becomes obvious. We're therefore getting into our customer's own world and into their own views. It all comes down to discovery. So answer the question for yourself, what value might this specific customer see with our product? Well, if they see value, we're not going to be able to convey that value without awareness in the organization. And to convey awareness in the organization, that awareness has to come from a conversation. And that's where the sales process comes in. So if we ask ourselves how it might be in the customer's best interest, then we're going to be able to start with value and encourage that gatekeeper to get on the phone with us and introduce us to others. So back to our handy dandy 2x2 chart. Once we have done all of those things, we should be able to map out the individuals and where they live on each phase of our chart. So we've identified that we've got Kelly Kellogg, Brett Brighton, Laura Love, Abe Apple, Joe Jenkins, Sarah Smith, and Tom Turnings. And we've been able to understand, how influential are they? How close to being a decision maker are they? And where do they lie on the supporter versus blocker continuum? So what do we do with those organizational individuals? So if they happen to be very influential and they happen to support our position and the initiative that we're working on, manage them closely. This one's obvious. We all know when we've got someone talking to them, we need to have great follow-up game. We need to engage with them closely and often. Similarly, if you've got someone who really supports you, but they're not going to weigh in on the deal so much, you want to keep them in the loop. It's important that they stay a supporter for you, and they can only do that if they're abreast on pieces of information that relate to the opportunity. Last is being able to monitor the individual who strongly opposes your position. They're not in favor of this deal getting done, or they're not very influential. You're just going to monitor them because they could potentially spike up and influence at any time. Remember, we're operating in a stance of incomplete information. And actually, last but certainly not least, is keep satisfied. These people are some of the most important people to pay attention to. They're highly influential and they are not in favor of the deal getting done. Most people, when we work with them, will actually not engage the individuals that fall into the influential blocker category. Actually, this is one of the most important people to go have a one-on-one conversation with and understand why it is that they potentially are opposed to the opportunity. So we may want to focus majority of our conversations with the manage closely. A very close second is the keep satisfied. Lots to manage on your people map. And when we do that, we can start to understand a nature of the relationships, the webs of relationships. So Kelly Kellogg may be our main contributor and our main decision maker here. She might be the one who ultimately signs the check. But we see strong influence on her from Brett Brighton and from Laura Love. We also see quite significant influence from Tom Turnings, maybe not as heavy of an influence, but Tom Turnings is a blocker and still quite influential. So the question for you all as we end today's conversation is, who are you going to schedule your next one-on-one conversations with? And I'll answer that for us. The next one-on-one conversations that we're going to have are with Brett Brighton, Kelly Kellogg, and Tom Turnings, and probably in that order. So when we think about it, Kelly Kellogg, we got to talk to. She's going to be our main decision maker. Tom Turnings, we might not want to. It might be an uncomfortable conversation, but we got to do it. We need a one-on-one with them. And last but not least, we got to talk to Brett. He's going to be a close supporter and also influential in the opportunity. So when we do all of those things, it takes us from chaos to order, from order to influence, and from influence to impact for our customers' organizations. So Cody, I'm going to wrap this up right now. I'll stop screen sharing and pass it over to you to do some wrap up.
Yeah, absolutely. Great presentation, Jessica. What I would encourage everyone to do is drop questions in the Q&A box if you have any. That way Jessica can go over any questions that you have. So if you could do that now, that would be great. I don't see any right now. I did have some trouble in my last session with them. Oh, I do see one now. Do you have a preferred tool for mapping the org chart?
Aaron, such a good question. You know, there are a lot of really great ones out there. And nice to see you, Aaron. Thanks for hopping on with us. You know, we're testing one out right now that's just called People Maps, and you got my email here. If anyone ever wants a referral to that, happy to share it. It integrates with Salesforce. It's pretty new, but pretty seamless and easy to use. It is very user friendly. We've loved it.
Any more questions?
Awesome. Cool.
Okay.
Well, Cody, thanks so much for having me on today. I know you guys probably have a little bit of wrap up to do.
Yeah, I can run through my last bit of the session. If you would stop sharing, I can finish up.
Oh, sure. Awesome. I think Perfect. Aaron had one more question as a follow-up. What's your preferred type of org chart? You know, I actually, my preference is I like to do it just by department. I find that to be easiest. The one we went through today is the most common one, Aaron, doing that 2x2 where you've just got a spectrum of influence and you've got a spectrum of are they a blocker or supporter. That's a really nice visual to be able to map out the full spectrum, but you miss the departmental influence. So if you do a lot of departmental type selling, where lots of departments need to collaborate and agree on the opportunity, having columns by department can be very helpful.
Awesome. Let me get situated real quick so we can go ahead and start wrapping it up now. Do appreciate that, Jessica. We do want to remind everyone about our DEMOFEST game, where each session you attend and each session feedback survey you fill out gets you points to win some of our awesome prizes, so don't forget to do that. We are very excited to be bringing DEMOFEST on the road again as DEMOFEST X. We had a great time in San Francisco in March, and we can't wait to bring the event to Dublin, London, and New York City later this year. You can register to join us at any of these events at demofest.com, which is also at the link in the Docs tab on the right of your screen. We also encourage you to stop by our expo hall to visit our premier partners of DEMOFEST. Remember, there is no transfer of money involved in this event, so all of our partners have gone above and beyond to contribute to making this event a success for all of you. Thank you all for joining this session today. Thank you for all joining this session today, supporting sales and expanding the people map, addressing common objections that keep your sellers' prospect influence maps too small, and thank you to Jessica for that valuable insight and knowledge. Up on the screen are the upcoming sessions. You will automatically be pushed to the next session in your track, and you can switch tracks or sessions by toggling to the agenda tab at the top left of your screen. We'll see you soon.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, Cody.
See ya.